You might be surprised by the sheer number of abandoned aircraft, and behind each one, there's a mysterious story. From defense forces that just didn't work out, to plane wrecks left untouched for decades. Here are 14 abandoned aircraft. Number 14, the Bartini-Beriev VVA-14. This abandoned Soviet amphibious aircraft was a prototype during the 1970s and was able to reach high speeds for long distances. Many scientists thought this would be the next big thing in aviation despite the bizarre design. In 1974, it did manage to log 107 flights with 103 hours in the air. It's possible though, the expectations were a little bit too high and the engines needed a serious upgrade in order for this plane to properly function. It now sits abandoned outside at a Moscow aviation museum. Number 13, Bali abandoned aircraft. The island of Bali is known around the world as being a top place for going on a resort-style vacation. However, some tourists might be a little bit surprised to come across this abandoned Boeing 737. It's not on a runway, but actually found in a limestone quarry. You can find it on Google Earth on the southern coast of the Bukit Peninsula, only about a few minutes away from the beautiful beach. It's believed that the owner of the aircraft had trouble paying it off and eventually just started rusting away. Keeping up with those private plane expenses can be a little bit tough. It's located on private property, but photographers and urban explorers might pay the price to check it out. On Street View, you can see parts of the tail popping out, but local guides suggest climbing up one of the containers if you want to get a quick look. Number 12, Ellinikon abandoned airport planes. Formerly the main airport of Athens, it was located in a nearby suburb and roughly served 11 million passengers each year on average. Built in 1938, it was under German occupation for quite some time and was transformed into an airbase. Later on, it was utilized as an American airbase, but the last flight took place here in 2011. A few planes here have been stuck ever since, and who knows if they'll ever soar the skies ever again. Here we see an aerial view of some Olympia airline passenger planes that will likely have some mechanical issues. The new airport used for the Athenians and travelers is found to the east of this forgotten area. You can also zoom in on Google Maps and about 7 different planes pop up, but it doesn't seem as though they'll be taking off anytime soon due to the condition of the runway. Number 11, Thailand airplane graveyard. Planes are used each and every day, and we've had them as a way of transportation for the past century now. Planes were at one point a scarce commodity. Now, there are so many of them, they're left abandoned. With advancements in technology and from overuse, planes that were once miles in the sky now rot away or scrap for parts. Here we see what's left of an airplane in Thailand that's been scrapped for electrical wires and relentlessly graffitied by gangs in the area. An investor wanted to see if he could somehow turn the fuselage of planes into some type of seating arrangement for a restaurant/amphitheater. It was also difficult keeping the planes in good condition due to the humid climates. People can still wander inside the giant rust buckets and see what's left behind from the past. Number 10, Advanced Aircraft, Mojave Desert. There appears to be an F-4 Phantom on a remote dirt trail intersection in Eastern California. You can check it out for yourself also on Google Maps. It's kind of near some strange looking buildings with circular streets. It's about 4 or 5 miles away from Edward Air Force Base, and there's really no sign of civilization for quite some distance. It would be at least a 3 or 4 mile hike from the nearest highway, but we'd be really curious to see what it looks like up close. It just doesn't seem like the right place to park an aircraft. The story as to why this plane is still here still remains a mystery. However, Edwards Air Force Base is nearby. Number 9, Lesotho Defense Force. The landlocked country of Lesotho is completely surrounded by South Africa. It isn't known for having the most impressive air force in the world. They typically rely on their geographical boundaries to stay independent. The government spends less than $32 million each year, which is actually less than one of our fighter planes. They currently have about 105 helicopters, and a few were donated by Libya. The abandoned plane that we see here is what's left over from a rough crash landing. The Casa C-212 has notable body and nose damage and was likely scrapped for parts shortly after the photo was taken. Number 8, the Nakor Pathum abandoned planes. Decommissioned planes are sent to this graveyard in Nakor Pathum, Thailand, and they've almost eroded away to the point where you can barely tell that they're planes. The Royal Thailand Air Force was established as early as 1913, so it's clear aviation is a big part of their history. However, almost all but few of their air bases were built by the US, which turned out to be a costly error in some cases. Maintaining the air bases here, far from the mainland of America, was certainly difficult, and the US decided to take their focus to other nations instead. Artists who utilize the decaying planes to their advantage might also decide to get a little bit artistic and place mannequins inside to confuse people. Number 7. Abandoned Soviet helicopter, Latvia. Found in the capital city of Riga, a former relic of the Soviet Union's power still sits intact but totally abandoned. Known as the Mi-6, it was used as a heavy transport helicopter designed to carry a large amount of passengers for both the military and civilian purposes. It was developed partially in order to explore the vast eastern regions of Russia, but in this case, the northern border of Latvia during the Cold War. You can see in this photo how large it is in comparison to a regular car that's a few meters behind it. You can also tell right away the green paint is starting to deteriorate on the specific model, but it's hard to say if it still works at all. The wheels on it look pretty new, and it's likely that it's been fixed up a little bit just in case the Latvian army needs it. Number 6. Douglas crash, New Zealand. Flying a plane takes hours upon hours of time practicing, and even then, accidents still happen. The clouds over the hills of New Zealand made visibility next to impossible, and the taller the mountains get, the more difficult it is to avoid. The two well-experienced pilots who were victims of this crash hit the ground at a high speed at Rannotter Point on the South Island coast in 1948. Parts of the wreckage are still visible, and a plaque was placed as a memorial for the lost pilots. At the time of the crash, the wings and some engines looked as though that they were still intact, but it's hard to say the current condition without going there currently. The crash isn't visible on Google Maps due to the high amount of forestation here. Number 5. Hijacked Cuban plane. People who really want to come to the US might take drastic measures such as hijacking planes from the Cuban government in order to get here. In 2014, a stolen twin-engine Antonov 24 made it to the US soil from Havana to Key West. The immigrants were captured and authorities were trying to figure out what to do with the plane for a while. Not being worth much more than scrap metal, it went on auction a couple years later, but it's quite impressive that they were able to make it here without the US taking it as a huge threat. Number 4. MIG Statues. Is an airplane still considered abandoned if it's used as a statue? In any case though, the entire airbase here where these statues are located is abandoned, so I guess you should. With mounting tensions between the Soviet Union and China, Mongolia was caught right between the two. It became a satellite state of the Union, and massive construction projects of complex military bases took place in the 1970s. The Soviets were really quite good at building massive structures in the middle of nowhere, and in this case, we see quite a few jet fighters being used as construction material. Number 3. Cosmodrome, Kazakhstan. We all know how the Soviet space program was up to some serious competition with the US, and they sent stuff into space before we even got there. Massive missiles have been launched here, and various space equipment was tested. The area where this spaceship is located is quite remote, in the middle of nowhere in Kazakhstan, so it's fairly surprising that people returned to this place since they left it. It's believed that this spacecraft actually made it to space at some point. One of the Russian space shuttles here that we see in this photo is at the museum of the city of Kalaknor. Visitors can even go inside the cockpit of the space shuttle where the astronauts would have sat during missions. Number 2. Ivan Baranovski P-39. This remote abandoned plane was likely to spend eternity in a lake in the middle of Russia until it was finally discovered. You might look at it right away and think, hold on a minute, that looks like an American design. What's it doing with the Soviet red star on it? Don't forget, at one point in time, the US and Russia had similar foes, so the US was alright with trying to help out the Ruskies. The P-39 was fairly easy to mass produce, cheap to construct, but it could also get shot down really easily. The Soviet pilot, Ivan Baranovski, apparently did not employ his parachute and was discovered inside the cockpit of this plane in 2004. Also, within the plane, there were maintenance logs, which leads them to believe that there was an issue. No bolt holes were found, and it was discovered pretty far away from enemy lines near the city of Murmansk. And number 1. Plane wreck Belize. Imagine crash landing into a wild sanctuary that's full of wild jaguars. That's going to take some serious survival skills to make it out alive. A zoologist by the name of Alan Rabinowitz was apparently ready for the challenge after that's exactly what happened. He was trying to take off in a small aircraft while a thunderstorm in the Caribbean was wreaking havoc upon Belize. A tall tree clipped his wing, knocking it right off, causing an intense nosedive. Alan even said that during an interview, his only hopes were that someone finds his body. He's lucky the jaguars didn't eat him right away, and he lost consciousness for a while. This awakening experience for him certainly makes him appreciate his life just a little bit more. The plane is still there at Coxcomb Basin Wildlife Sanctuary, and you can even take a hike there.